What's good? It's Andrew from travelingguitarist.com. Today I'm talking to you guys about guitar nuts. I'm just going to do a brief explanation of what a guitar nut is, as well as some of the types and the price. So a guitar nut, put simply, it's a component that luthiers use to hold the guitar strings in place between the neck and the headstock. So they just have these little slits cut into it, as you can see here, and these house the strings. So for a better definition is something that I wrote here. I said that a guitar nut is a small piece of material, usually plastic, bone, or graphite or metal, with small slits cut into the material, which is meant to securely hold the guitar strings where the neck ends and the headstock begins. I feel like that's the best way of putting it. That's what I put in the article. You can kind of see what it looks like here as well on my ESP. This is on my PRS, and this is on my ESP. In terms of the type of nuts that you have available, you have plastic. Plastic is generally thought of as being the most inferior type of nut, simply because plastic isn't really conducive to sound. It's not the best material for sound. But it's also the cheapest. And if chances are, if you bought like a poverty model before of some guitar, like, I don't know, like some guitar that costs $50, there's a good chance that they used a plastic nut on it simply because they're so inexpensive. On the other hand, there are higher grade plastics that are apparently much better. For instance, micarta and corian, I think that's how you say it. And also there's a material called Tusk, T-U-S-Q, and that's a high-end plastic that's apparently meant to mimic bone. It's meant to mimic the sound quality of bone. But yeah, that's essentially what the plastic is, and that's all I have to say about that. And you also have metal nuts as well, like you have brass nuts, titanium, steel, and more. These tend to be the most expensive simply because they're made out of metal. They're also known for being the most bright. They're the brightest, which makes sense because, if you think about the way that a string would reverberate on a piece of steel, it would probably be a lot brighter. There's not much sound being absorbed by the nut. Apparently, they were a lot more common in the 70s, especially with like bluegrass and country style players, because they have that. It has that nice brightness and that twanginess to it. But people don't really use them anymore. Like, I haven't seen a metal nut on a guitar pretty much ever, to be honest. Like, if you go into any guitar shop, I never see metal nuts. I'm sure they definitely exist. Probably on like a banjo. Maybe on a banjo they're more common, but you won't see it on like a Fender Strat or something like that. You won't see a metal nut on a Fender Strat unless someone put that in intentionally. And then you have bone nuts. Now, bone nuts are thought of as being the best. Like, that's generally thought of as being the absolute best nut that you can put on a guitar. Not only do they have good sound quality, from what I've been told, but they're also easier for luthiers to shape. They're a good material to work with, and that's why a lot of people prefer them. There are some ideas surrounding it that people say are a myth. For instance, some will say that bone is inconsistent due to the natural quality of it because of its naturally occurring status as a material. People say that there's like pockets of inconsistencies in the material, but others say that that's not true, and it depends on the type of bone that you use and whether or not it's quality, and really it's just up to the manufacturer and who actually obtained the nut and who actually is working on it. But people say different things, and then you have graphite nuts, and then graphite nuts are made out of graphite, and apparently the main reason why people use them is because they're self-lubricating, and there isn't as much friction on the strings as other materials like plastic or steel. So they're known for having good tuning stability and for being self-lubricating, but apparently they tend to wear out much sooner. There's also this weird thing that people do. I used to read this recommended on guitar forums all the time, where people would tell you to shave off a bit of the graphite from a pencil and then like put it into the nut and then like put your strings in after. I don't know if that actually works, but people make that recommendation. I don't know, like to me it sounds like it doesn't work, and I tried it and I didn't really notice anything, but some people would make that recommendation. And then finally you have ebony nuts, and ebony nuts are cool because they look cool. They're usually black, and they just have this cool vibe about them, and apparently they soften quicker, but For the most part, I think they just look cool, and then the sound quality is just decent. If you want to find guitar nuts, you can find them on Amazon. They're all over Amazon, but you can also get them from Guitar Parts Resource, which is at this link here. This guy's got a ton of guitar nuts for sale, and all kinds that are shaped in different ways. He's even got tusk. For instance, he got all these different bone nuts, and they're reasonably priced, much better than Amazon. But yeah, you can find them in all different types of places. And I also have a chart here in my article where I explain the price range of each. They generally tend not to be expensive at all. Like a guitar nut, whether you get the best type possible or the worst type, like they're usually inexpensive. The only reason manufacturers use cheaper nuts like plastic is because they're producing them en masse. So if they can save $10 on each instrument across 10,000 different instruments that they produce that year, then it ends up it ends up being a lot. So if they $10 off 10,000 times 10,000 rather, then they save money. But for the most part, if you're like an individual person and you're just buying a nut, like it isn't going to matter like whether you spend $15 or $30, it's not really a big deal. And also, I just want to touch on some other things, that being that some people actually argue that the nut doesn't really matter that much. For instance, I read an article from a luthier, his name is Bob Colosi, and he says that the nut actually has like a negligible effect on the sound quality, that's not the case if you're playing open strings a lot, and that's what he says. But people debate that kind of thing, and at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to matter too much, like whether or not you have a bone nut or a ebony nut. It's not gonna do anything for you on a high level, And yeah, chances are if you want to get a new nut, it's best to just get a luthier to do it for you, unless you're handy. It's actually pretty simple. You just heat it up. You just heat it up with like a heat gun that will heat up the glue underneath the nut, and you can just take it right off. And then when you want to put it back on, you just put adhesive under it and you put it back on and set it there. And that's essentially how you do it. And I think I don't know if I touched on this already, but in terms of the best material, people say that bone is like the gold standard. I included a link to Amazon if you wanted to get one. But yeah, that's it. I hope this helped illustrate some things for you. Just to kind of recap what a nut is, it's just essentially just a piece of material that joins the headstock and the neck in which the strings are housed. So you can see here, it just holds the guitar strings in place. But anyway, that's it. That's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure you like and subscribe. All right, peace.